All right, I have sent the feed to you.
And we should be live. Hey guys, how's it going? It's been ages since you last seen me. I promise I'll be back sometime soon. I'll just have to figure out a lot of real life stuff at the minute. But today we're here. Today we're joined by Rob from the Longest Night podcast, as well as Eric from the Grease Goblins channel. And we're here to discuss Game of Thrones season 8. It's been, I think, 3 years since I've done that on this channel, and I figured I wanted to be nuanced. Hence, why Rob is here. Rob is uh, has been speaking in favor of of season 8 and the ending of Game of Thrones for a couple of years now, and I figured he's the best person to discuss this with. Coupled with Eric and I, who obviously, we had our gripes, and we also had some positives about it, and today we're here to discuss some of it. Hey guys, how's it going?
Fantastic, Ricky. Fantastic. It's been a long time
Fantastic.
coming. And yeah, we're going to talk about season 8. It's going to be interesting because I haven't actually talked about season 8 in, I think, in depthly, really much at all, and since like maybe the first year of my channel. So it'll
Hmm.
be interesting to see our thoughts as the years have gone by. But yeah, what about you, Rob?
Yeah, I think doing the whole podcast, doing that whole run through from episode 1 right to the end I was working on that for 2 years with Lizzie, my co-host. Once you go through something like that and get to the end of it, you think, right, I don't ever want to talk about this ever again. And I haven't spoken about Game of Thrones or season 8 in any kind of meaningful capacity for about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. But yeah, I'm excited to do this. This is the first live stream I've ever been part of on
Oh
anything.
wow, we're
I'm
honored.
normally someone who hides behind a script and lots and lots of editing. So I will be exposed in this one way or another.
This is where all the dirty secrets come up.
Yeah,
Specifically
can't hide.
Ricky's.
Oh yeah,
All the
obviously.
dirty secrets about him being a filthy green supporter. He doesn't care about the small folk at all.
Well, it took 2.5 whole minutes for you to call me a green supporter, so I
Got to get it
guess
in there
we
somewhere.
really haven't changed at all.
Just noticed that the wall in this room is green. That isn't a declaration of anything either. It's just that you can't really
Oh,
paint walls black now, can you? Because
A
you
lot of
just
green
that's
supporters in
the
this
room
chat.
feels
that's
smaller. So
um, we figured we wanted to start it with the positives and discuss what we actually enjoyed, actually liked about Game of Thrones season 8, and who better to start um, this topic than Rob. You've been in the defense of season 8 online. You've always defended it, and you had your arguments. It was always I remember we once recorded, and you um, defended it really nicely, and you had me had me rethink some of my gripes too, because you're. But I'll let you go. I'll let you start with this.
God, yeah, where do I start? I mean, do you have like a specific question, maybe? Like,
Well,
I don't know, something I could jump off of and then
in the
defend
midst
from
of
that
all
position.
in the midst of all the hate that was going on, what made you feel so strongly about this that you started to really defend it online, and then
Hmm.
you have what was the thing that kept you going in the middle of, because I remember back then I stopped making content about the show entirely because it was just I'm someone, if I don't like something, then I'll speak less and less about it. And it was everywhere. Like, it was very lucrative to make content about
Yeah.
this, and they kind of forgot about that, and they kind of forgot about this, and um you really took it too hard to go against that, and make content surrounding why you know
Hmm.
the internet may be wrong.
At the I mean, to be honest, at the time, I guess it was the confusion because after episode 3, the long night, after that, I remember waking up the next morning because I watched the episode and just kind of slept through and didn't really look at any reaction. And then when I went online, it was very, very. I think it was more split than people like to remember. I don't think the reaction was all negative. There were lots and lots and lots of positive things, but it was way too I've been waiting for this episode for as long as I've been watching Game of Thrones, and I thought, right, I can't deal with any of this. I can't deal with the end of this. I'm just gonna back away. And so I kind of left social media for 3 weeks, watched the end of Game of Thrones, and then when I came back, I was like, oh, I'm in like the 10% of people that liked this, I see. And so like me being part of the 10%, I was like, oh, I wonder like, am I wired incorrectly? Have I misread something? But then every time I kept watching it, I kept looking for the problems that had been so angrily listed everywhere. And I kept looking for these issues and I kept expecting them to hit me. And every time I watched it, I just found it to be braver, bolder, definitely harder to watch each time. I think that like the big thing for me that I took out of it is how much it, at least after the third episode, how much it wanted to kind of consciously deny any kind of catharsis. I thought that like the thing with the bells that has always really struck me and makes it one of my favorite episodes, which is that everybody loses, but nobody's really to blame. I don't think it's the right. I don't know if it's necessarily the right course of action to look at that episode and say that, like, right, so all of that was Daenerys' fault, or it was Cersei's fault because she did that to Daenerys. I think it's just a lot of people, basically everybody, is attached to the Game of Thrones, and everybody loses because they have bought into this idea of the game. I think for me, the enemy of the show was always the game. It was, the realm, this lie that they all tell each other. Even like characters that we love, like Sam and Varys, I suppose. Like, by the end, Sam is involved in the game. He's been up at the wall for 6 seasons, but he's the one who's like, no, John's the rightful king, and I must tell him this. I must cause this rift. I must cause this problem because it's the right thing to do. I don't know if it necessarily is the right course of action what Sam does in that episode by telling John that he's like, hey, listen, you're actually meant to be king, so what about that? And Varys towards the end, where he buys into this idea that like, oh, the system will be fine as long as the right person's at the top of it. And so I started interrogating those ideas, and the more and more that I kind of pulled away from it, and the more and more I read the negative stuff and looked up the negative stuff, I just did not find myself agreeing with a lot of it. There's definitely not like, I definitely agree that like maybe there wasn't enough time. I would have liked a bit more, especially after the long night. I would have liked a longer period of reflection. I feel like another episode like A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but after the long night, with the characters just talking again, but talking about like, okay, what do we do? How do we go on after this existential threat? Those kinds of things, I think there are definitely issues with it. But then I also thought about like, trying to do 10 episodes at that size, at that thing. Is it possible? And I don't know enough about TV production to really comment on that and say confidently how I would have preferred it to have gone. There's definitely issues that I have with the final season, but I thought that the final kind of, the question that always kind of hung over my head when I was watching through the show is like, how far is too far in pursuit of what you believe is the greater good? Like, how far will you push it to put your vision into the world and your vision of ruling into the world? And there was a review by Gretchen Felker Martin that said like, you can't build a better world with fire and blood. And I don't necessarily think that was an attack on Daenerys. I think it's about the show as a whole, and it kind of made me go back to season 6 with the Hound and Brother Ray discussing about the various ways to deal with violence. And it's like, you don't cure a disease by spreading it to other people, but you don't cure it by dying either. And I think that unanswerable question is the thing that really, really lands heavy and so hard at the end. of the show. So that was kind of a brief overview, I suppose, of like what I
Yeah,
think. But like,
yeah.
what
It's a
about you
very
two?
loaded
Like, what?
question to
Yeah,
say like, why do you love this? Like, like you go on forever and ever and ever.
yeah. Which is, that is precisely why you're here, because you really, really do love it, and we're more in line with the general consensus, I think,
Yeah,
that book reader kind of view on it, that um but to be honest, the promise that I have with the ending of Game of Thrones didn't start in season 8, and it was way earlier when I
yeah, yeah.
felt that it kind of lost its touch with what it was originally supposed to be. But I'll let you go first, Eric. What are some of the things that you really liked about season 8 of Game of Thrones?
Okay, so I want to say this right away. This is a positive that's grown on me because I think we give Amelia Clark criticism for some of the acting she did in the earlier seasons, and there was health issues involved. There was other things going on, but Amelia Clark, by the time we got to season 8, her acting, I mean, she was fully in the character. Like, regardless of what you wanted to say about what they did with Daenerys or the writing for the character, she herself, I think, did a very good job in season 8. So that's one positive that I always think about with season 8. I think Theon overall, I liked majority of where his character went. I think he had one of the best endings for a character. I think there are certain things because of how season 8 is not liked. People put certain things under a microscope. They look at, oh yeah, this is another thing we should hate on. Things like the Starbucks cup that majority of people didn't see, and then maybe a couple of people figured it out, and then all of a sudden now everybody's seeing it. It's like, yeah, you want to have good continuity, but stuff like that happens when you're in a production and you're worrying about audio, you're worrying about video. Like, those are things that I'm just like, okay. I think for the most part, season 8 still did a good job in terms of visually things are pleasing to look at. Again, going back to Daenerys and everything that happens at King's Landing, it was still really visually appealing. We'll probably talk about the Long Night episode where there's a lot of criticism on visibility of seeing things. Even in that episode, there are some really pretty shots of the dragons up in the clouds. It's one of my actual favorite shots of the entire show. So I think the overall quality in terms of like sound design, like your normal things, costume design was fairly good in season 8. Some of the things you kind of expect from Game of Thrones. Those are some of the things that come to mind instantly in terms of things I liked. Also, I'd say some of the stuff in episode 2, where there's a lot more conversations between characters.
Oh yeah.
Brienne being knighted, always a good scene. Probably the best scene, I would say, for me of season 8. Those are the things that come to mind that I think about positively with season 8. Ricky, what would you like to add to that or discuss about that?
I think you speak my mind, especially about episode 2. I think, and I've said this when it aired, and I still stand behind that opinion. I think episode 2 of season 8 is the best Game of Thrones episode since season 4. In that it really focuses on the characters, and it was a really good opportunity to get all of these characters together, and they've done that, and that resulted in a very nuanced and very character focused episode that I enjoyed. And I remember that I was really happy when it aired. That changed then, of course. I but talking about the positives, I think episode 2 was great. I also liked Theon's ending, and I think that in general, those two would probably be the ones that come into mind. Talking about the positives.
Sounds good. I think those are some of the main ones that I've seen people that dislike the show. Now, I will say this: most people that hate the show are not willing to accept there are positives in season 8. So I think it's good to start with like common ground because especially we're gonna have more discussion on certain things.
Someone just commented he liked it. It was Ashley, and someone.
Yeah, there are dozens of us, dozens. Yeah.
Actually, I think a really interesting point.
I didn't know.
Ricky, before you continue, before I lose this train of thought, when we were talking about like Game of Thrones, as Rob specifically brought this up, how especially season 8 when it was coming out, it wasn't just like everybody straight hated it. This was especially true during the end of the White Walker plotline. Like I remember people being like, kind of like The Last Jedi was viewed at the time, or I guess even still now. Like it's very split. Some people love the way it was done. Some people did not like the way it was done. And then I think as time went on, of course, I think it started to get a little bit more one-sided. But yeah, there still are people that like season 8. But yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
continue, Ricky or
Um,
Rob, whichever.
someone commented, I didn't know there was still a debate to be had on this. There's always a debate to you can always
Yeah.
sharpen your mind by being open to it. Like to me, season 8, I don't think I'll go out of this and change my mind about some of the problems that I've had, but it always keeps your mind fresh if you care to hear the other side, and especially in today's culture where everything sort of becomes a hive mind kind of thinking on especially on media. I think it's important to be having those debates. The debate is like, yeah, it's not a debate. It's more like a regular ass conversation, and
Well, the other
no
thing
one's
that I would, sorry, the other thing I would sort of say to that is that like opinions on art don't have to be static. They don't have to
yeah.
stay the same. Like in 10 years' time, I haven't watched the last season of Game of Thrones in about 3 years. Like I was saying at the beginning, like you really commit to a full podcast and then you get to the end and you go, right, I never want to look at that again. But I could watch Game of Thrones season 8 in like 5 years' time, 10 years' time, something like that, and think, oh, none of this works for me anymore. Like none of the, and I think you learn things about yourself if you go back and revisit things. You learn things about maybe like the world that you didn't. Even just last night, it's really random, but like I was watching a documentary from about 10 years ago called Austin to Boston. It's about a bunch of musicians on tour from Austin, Texas to Boston, Massachusetts. And when I watched it about 10 years ago, I was like, I don't get this at all. I don't like any of these musicians. I have no interest in them. So I'm just going to hold my hands up and walk away. But I decided to watch it last night completely randomly because it's on YouTube for free. It's only about 70 minutes long. And I didn't love it, but I liked it that just that little bit more. I enjoyed the scenery that they focused on. I enjoyed their little friendships and relationships, the fact that it's just a bunch of independent musicians trying to make it work. And so I don't know, somebody could, I mean, they're not my favorites, but the Star Wars prequels have gone through a massive reappraisal in recent years as well. And if people can decide that they like them, so give it another 10 or 15 years, and there might be just enough people out there memeing Game of Thrones enough to suddenly then be a bit softer about how it all finished. You never know.
You literally brought up my exact example. I was about to say I'm a big prequel guy, and the prequels used to be hated on. You got bullied
Mhm.
for liking the prequels back in the day, so who knows?
Anything's possible. One thing I will say though is that my opinion of the end was definitely colored by the fact that at the time I hadn't read any of the Song of Ice and Fire novels, so I had no attachment to any other version of the story. I always took Game of Thrones as just like a TV show. Nowadays, I kind of see it as like season 1 to 4, I always call it the adaptation era, and then season 5 to 8, I always call that the TV show era because it's just
Yeah.
they're aiming for very different things. I think like season 1 to 4 has very different objectives to season 5 and 8, but not being a book reader definitely meant that I was more sympathetic just to the TV show as its own thing, as opposed to an extension of books that exist. I have since read a Game of Thrones, just the first novel, and it also Game of Thrones itself came to me at an incredibly rough point in my life, and
Mm.
so that was like 2015, and so sinking myself into that show was part of the process of me getting out of that rough period of my life. And so by the time it came around towards the end, I was always going to be a little bit more willing to forgive it, but I would say that like I hope I'm self-aware enough to look through my biases with things like this. And we'll get onto it, I'm sure. There are things about the final season that I don't like, and looking at it from thinking with my head and my heart, like thinking with my heart I love it so much, but thinking with my head I can see I've never ever had a problem with people being disappointed, by the end of Game of Thrones at all. I think the problem that I've had is that the disappointment mutated into anger. And I know that people can be very performative online, and it's not all. I mean, you see something funny and you type, "I'm screaming." No one's screaming. So everybody embellishes how they feel, but like it was the anger then mutating into arguments and into fights. And I'm not going to say I was completely innocent. Like, you're in the midst of it. You forget that people are people. You just see usernames and you just start like typing angrily at them and stuff. But I think that there was a point that was raised by We Thrones, who's on Twitter as well. And I remember him saying, and he put it quite well, where it's like it was difficult as somebody who liked the final season to start having discussions with people who didn't, because and I imagine it was the same on the other side coming back towards us, that like it was difficult because you had to kind of get through the checklist of things that weren't actually to do with the content of the show itself. It was like people projecting their it was like people projecting their idea of the nefarious and sinister things that David Benioff and Dan Weiss must have deliberately done to hurt people. And it's difficult to get past that layer and then have a discussion like this, which is why I'm glad that we're all here, because I'm very, very keen these days. Now it's all over. Now it's in the past. I'm just very keen for both sides of the fandom to just get on again. It was so good around the beginning of House of the Dragon, because it felt like everybody was like, oh yeah, we're all friends here. Forget about Game of Thrones. It's House of the Dragon. We're all enjoying this one. But yeah, so there were loads of reasons why I was more forgiving, and it's been difficult.
And how that changed again, huh? It's
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I want to ask you to like, you may have discussed this on previous streams, but like, just as a random thing, because apparently a new quote has come up about it from Benioff and Weiss, just as a random thing, like the decision for Arya to kill the Night King, like Ricky, what was your instant reaction to that? Or like over time, I guess, in the first 6 months when you had time to think about it?
To be honest, I always thought that it was really stupid. Just the way that the scene goes, like she's literally jumping out of nothing, and it's this whole ninja sneak spy moment that I've always disliked, and always thought that Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones at that point had multiple moments that headed into that direction. So we've had enough time to get used to it, but coming off of like being a book reader, I think it goes against the very thing it kind of stands for, this out of nowhere and Deus Ex Machina kind of thing. I think if those moments occur in the books, it's earned. So if an army comes to save the day, it always comes with a cost, and I never liked that moment, but I'm not sure. Since I don't think that we're gonna get a Night King figure in the books at all. I think it will still be like this hive mind kind of thing, where they're controlled by an entity that we might not even get to see, and it can be creepy and eerie, and the White Walkers talk to each other. It sounds like glass shattering, and that's a really good vibe for a book. But how do you adapt that? And that's where we delve into adapting something for a television show. And that's something that I've gotten a whole new perspective on since I've adapted a book into a play, where you really have to look at those kind of things, and you're not a production of like quazillion trillion dollars that may actually pull this off. You have to look at it and decide, how do I keep in line with the overall message of this book, and how can I bring this to the stage in my case. So there are differences just in the way they could do it, but then again, Arya coming out of nowhere, to get back to the question, sorry, but Arya jumping out of nowhere to kill the Night King was extremely goofy for me personally.
What about you?
I'll just add on. I wasn't as critical as Ricky when I first saw it. So when I first saw it, I was kind of like in this middle ground where I was like, I kind of felt disappointed, but I didn't hate it at the time. And I think the idea could have worked. I just didn't love the execution. Like Arya killing the Night King to me could have made sense. It's just kind of what Ricky already said. Like the way it was done, in which it's like Arya just seems like she comes out Superman, like attacks him. And so I think you mix that with also, it seems like there's no real conclusion to Jon's storyline being the main person against the Night King. I know this was the major criticism that people had at the time was there's no like Jon Snow is screaming at a dragon and like in another scene leading up to it. And so I think it's just a mixture of things to me that it didn't feel narratively compelling the way it ended, but it also to me it didn't feel like the way it was executed as an idea of Arya killing the Night King felt natural, given she comes basically screaming out she's supposed to be this really badass assassin, and it just kind of it felt a little, I don't know, something just didn't feel right about it. I don't know what words to say, but that was my overall thoughts on it as a whole.
The screaming is, in retrospect, I don't mind her vaulting off a pile of dead bodies and flashing past a bunch of White Walkers, because like as soon as they turned in season 7, as soon as they turned the mission to kill the Night King into like an assassin thing, if you get him, you kill everyone kind of thing. It was like, okay, so there's like the number of candidates that it could be is maybe kind of dwindled down a little bit. Who's Westeros's best assassin, sort of thing. But with me, with Arya, like I remember waking up the morning after that episode, and I didn't know how I felt about any of it. It was all noise, and that was why I kind of just stepped away. And I think it was because, from the first scene in Game of Thrones, you are basically looking forward to the day that the White Walkers come to Westeros and everyone has a big fight. Like that, it's the prologue. It's maybe where everything is going to end one way or another. If the Winds of Winter ever makes it to us, like, it's like that is presumably the final kind of conflict. And so I realized that I didn't know how I felt because I'd been looking forward to something for so long, and now it was gone. I'd had nothing more to look forward to in that regard, and it felt at the time like I don't know how I feel about that not being, I had to sit with it. And in the end, the conclusion that I kind of came to over time is that like I think lots of characters would have been perfect to literally anybody, like from the main cast, they all had a reason, one way or another, to be the one to do the Night King and stab him. Everybody has a reason. I think the Night King doesn't talk. He's a pretty blank slate, so like anybody can project anything onto him. And I think like with Jon, Jon would have been absolutely fine. Sword fight, kill him, great. Yep, he was the guy who warned everyone about the White Walkers. Awesome, I get it. Jaime was, sort of like, well, I technically kicked off all the events of this series, and so I'm going to complete my redemption arc by sacrificing myself in order to save the country that I've caused so much, harm to. Melisandre, she was like, the lead voice for the Lord of Light, I suppose, and so it could have been her. Daenerys, she came to Westeros to save it, initially, so it could have been her too, and I think that would have been fine. But with Arya, I've always kind of seen it as like, she spends a lot of time worshipping death. She says all those names. She goes off to the Faceless Men to be able to better study and better worship death. And then when she comes back, she's like, right, I'm a little revenge queen. I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to send all these people to the god of death. I'm going to do all this. But then when she comes back to Winterfell and she sleeps with Gendry and she's back under like her roof where she grew up and she's surrounded by her family again, I think she kind of realizes, she goes from this girl in the trailer who's like, I know death. It's got many faces. I want to see this one, sort of thing. And then there's that moment in the 3rd episode where she gets hit by a white and her head smacks off a wall, and she's lying there looking at this like sea of whites that are like running towards her. And I think in that moment she realizes what death actually is. This thing that she's worshipped, she's never actually understood what it is until she's faced it head on. And then I think that's why she is then in the moment. She's like, right, okay, so I've been worshipping the god of death this whole time. Maybe the Night King is the god of death. Maybe I shouldn't have worshipped him. Maybe I need to give humanity another chance, actually. Which I think is then the heartbreaking thing in the Bells, where like she saves humanity from a death by ice and is there on the ground when it falls, and she watches people experience death by fire. I think like the contrast is really deliberate, where like she saves humanity and gives them a second chance, and what do? We go back to, oh, sod that existential threat. Like we've dealt with that now. Like it's throne time. It's about who wins again, and it turns out. I know this could feel narratively very unsatisfying, which is why I understand that people are disappointed. But I think like Arya heartbreakingly realizing that like the Night King ultimately was just a side quest. I can understand why that wouldn't be narratively satisfying, but like realizing in that moment, it must be pretty heartbreaking to be like, look, I vaulted off a bunch of dead bodies in a in a Hollywood extravaganza moment, and it turns out that we didn't learn anything from this, did we? Like
Yeah.
we all came together, and now we don't. And it could have been many characters. I understand why Arya's a bit like it's a bit out of left field. That's a bit strange because her plot wasn't connected. I've always been fine with John not being the guy because I always kind of see him as more like Frodo rather than Aragorn. You know, he's a messenger. He's a guy who carries the world on his back because he believes that he must. He's not like the secret king kind of lying in wait to take his rightful throne. He's someone who's like, I hate all of this. Every time he gets a title, he immediately tries to like, oh, fuck this. Like from when he dies and comes back, he's like gets named king in the north. He's like, I don't want to do it.
That is something that I've never had a gripe with, John not getting the cool sword fight with the Night King, because I also don't think that that's something that's in store for us in the books, and that goes in line with what I'm anticipating. What I'm anticipating about the final conflict is more of like a green scene war, something that I think history that I think they're the part about history being preserved, and the others going against history could be a clue for what's going to happen at Old Town. And we have Euron Greyjoy there at the minute in the books. So I think it's more my problems stem from what it could have been, and not really entirely from just the way it ended, because I think if they care to drag it on, really adapt Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, it all would have been different, because there was so much that was abandoned, that didn't make the cut. Characters that could have really added, and young Griff, for example, if we had that, the whole ending must be different then. And
Yeah.
but I'll let you go, Eric. I think you wanted to chime in on that whole Arya situation.
So the Arya thing, like I agree. Like I don't think it's bad that Arya kills the Night King. So it just kind of goes down to me for execution. But I think what I would have preferred seeing is there being some sort of like. I personally am on the other side of the fence. I think Jon should have had some sort of confrontation with the Night King. And I'm not even saying that he needs to kill the Night King. Just like there needs to be something there. Like when you kind of tease it, we're like, oh, Jon's gonna fight the Night King, and then okay, bodies get, brought back. Jon probably should have died in this moment.
The Night King dismisses him,
and then he just he just kind of leaves. Like even think about Daenerys. Like Daenerys gets a confrontation with the Night King. It doesn't go out that well, but she does get one. It's kind of weird that like the one character that's the most attached to it has nothing to do with the Night King or the main plot for almost the entire episode. And then the next character that you would think would be the next related to the Night King is just Bran, who kind of just, he's supposed to be bait, but like he also doesn't do anything the whole episode. He just kind of sits there, and he's kind of like quote unquote the distraction for Arya. I don't know. I
he's bait, isn't he?
Yeah. I feel like it could have been used better, the characters you had, and still have the same outcome, and it be more well accepted. If Arya kills the Night King, but it's Bran's doing something that's distracting the Night King, maybe he's working a dragon or whatever he's doing, and maybe you have John trying to fight him, but he fails at it. And then, Arya, because of all this chaos going on and all the whites are focused on this, Arya's able to sneak in, and then, she does her thing. So that's my critique with it. I think the idea, and this is broadly what I think about season 8 in general, is they have good ideas. I just don't necessarily like how we get there, or how do we utilize other characters within some of the ideas.
Audrey says, "Why are you guys still talking about the show?"
Been talking about the show consistently for
why not?
For how many years?
You're watching.
Why not?
So he's watching. So
it is known.
Yeah,
it is known. Yeah.
One thing actually that you just kind of mentioned there, Ricky, about like the book ending. I'm gonna have a go at my side here for a second, because there is a bit of an obsession within the very, very, very select small group of people who took something out of the end, which is that there is this insistence that, like, oh, well, the ending will be the same because these 3 major points were hit: Stannis, Hodor, Bran. So how could things be that different? But like, the books are like a million miles away from where and that's fine. I don't need I don't need the end of the books to validate my feelings. Like, I'm very comfortable with how I feel about the end of Game of Thrones. And if there's 2 endings to this story, then that's great. And then they can go and do another TV show in 20 years' time, or whenever the books are finished, or whatever outline we get. If the books are ever finished, and then there'll be a 3rd ending to the story, and it's like, well, great. Isn't that just great? Like, isn't it better to have more endings of this version of the story? Like, they all start in the same point.
It's a small issue. Just a very small issue of, Dream of Spring and come, actually releasing. Those are.
I feel bad because theory. Like, I make stuff. Like, I don't write books, but like, I make music, and trying to drag something to completion that cannot be dragged and will not be dragged. Like, you can take a horse to water as much as you want, but it must be, on some level, as much as it all must annoy everybody that the books aren't done yet, it will be annoying him more. Way more than anybody else. He will be feeling frustrations. He will be angry with himself.
The people who say that he doesn't care have lost their minds. It's bugging him more than anyone else, definitely.
I think, like, there is definitely, I think it's fair enough to think, like, not that he's necessarily lost interest in the world or the story, but like, maybe he has like reached a point where he's like, oh, maybe it would be too difficult to finish this, and like, I don't really know if I have it in me to carry on any further than where I am. But that's also fine, because it's his baby. Like, he made it, he can kind of do what he wants with it, which is fine. I understand, again, the disappointment. It's fine to be disappointed, but again, it's always the disappointment that mutates into anger, which mutates into conspiracy theories, which you end up so far down the rabbit hole on things like that, and it becomes very, very difficult when at the end of it, regardless of whether it's George R. R. Martin or David Benioff or Ryan Condal, they're just guys trying to make a thing. That's it. They're just guys trying to make a thing. Like, when you were saying, Ricky, before, about when you don't like things, you tend to talk about them less. I wish people would take that approach. I wish nobody cared about Game of Thrones anymore. Whenever I see,
at the same time, I don't think it's a valid point, because as Eric, I've talked about this with Eric a couple of times, and he's always of the impression that if he's invested in something and it's not as good as it used to, he still needs and wants to talk about it, because it's just something that's very important and dear to him. And to me, Game of Thrones was something. Oh, it's definitely fun to make fun about something as well, but it always has to, for me personally, it always has to stay respectful. And so I was not one of those types that went all out and I don't know, became psychotic about it, because there was a lot of that back in the day. I guess what bugged me the most about season 8 is that it, like, all the wasted potential of the couple of seasons that went before it really shined, because I think once we're towards the end, once we're everyone has their little ending, it becomes so clear to me that there's so much missing that got us to this point. Like, I can see Jon Snow going back north. I can see that as being something that happens in some capacity. I can even see Bran being a very important. Oh, that's a cat.
Yeah, she's
being
been
Sir Pounce, Sir Pounce.
I can see Bran being important, but those feel like notes. Those feel like notes that and the way we got there didn't feel earned in a way. That's
Yeah,
my
I'll put a
biggest
pin in it,
issue.
but yeah, Bran is an issue for me in the final
Yep.
season. Bran
Mm.
is definitely an issue with me. Bran and Euron are my two kind of big issues of the final season. I think we'll put a pin in that for the
Eric
negative
Nolan's here.
area, but yeah.
Eric Nolan says, he said, I like the bits I was
Hey,
in.
Eric.
I like those bits as well, Eric. By the way, Eric is pretty much the last shot of Game of Thrones. That
Yeah.
is Eric right there walking. Hits black.
Yeah.
So
I remember I remember when I interviewed Eric for The Longest Night a couple of years ago, and he said in the last shot of Game of Thrones, he said that guy the last thing you see in Game of Thrones is my backside, my arse, because I'm walking away from the camera.
Oh, I did want to bring something
Oh.
up that we were talking about earlier. Another thing, when you got to think about like the book and the show. For instance, in the show, one of the plot points is okay, Shireen is going to get burned by Stannis. In the books, we still have no idea how that's going to happen. Like, just trying to figure out how we get to that point is way different in the book to the show. So just those plot points that are given to the showrunners, it's totally different when you have plot lines that have been completely cut from the show, characters that act completely different, even in the earlier seasons, to their book counterparts. And that's not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but like, for instance, Jon Snow is kind of different in the book versus the show, and characters are aged up, they're aged down, whatever. So I did want to point that out just to kind of back that up.
Yeah, this is something that I, with regards to like, me trying to see the books and the show as like two separate things, they're just two versions of the same story. Like, okay, fine, yeah, it's likely that Stannis will burn Shireen. It's likely that we find out Hodor's name and how that all came about, and it's likely that Bran ends up on the throne. But like George R. R. Martin told those ideas to David Benioff and Dan Weiss like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And things could have changed in his head. We could be having delays because he's thought, no, maybe this idea might work better. Because, he always talks about, he doesn't like, I think, to be honest, the main issue that he's maybe having trouble ending the books is that George R. R. Martin, like, he likes to write forwards, doesn't he? One thing causes two things, causes four things, causes 8 things. And it's very, very hard to take that writing philosophy and then write towards a point that will end. But because there are so many things that will have changed over the last sort of like 2013, 2014 was like his last involvement with the show. And I don't know how much information Benioff and Weiss are privy to with George R. R. Martin's future plans, but like I imagine there will be things in it like R plus L equals J and all these things that are still unanswered, but like they could be very different because it was a bloody long time ago.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember anything I was actually thinking 12 years ago at all.
Yeah.
I don't remember what opinions I had or what ideas I had. It was a very, very long time ago, and I know that like stories,
what I still
like frameworks,
don't buy,
but yeah.
what I still don't buy is that we're not gonna get a new POV character. That's what George once said. No new POV character. It's the last one. And I would not be surprised to get even more Ironborn perspectives. Just like out of nowhere, some very distant relative that pops up. I don't know. Garyon Lannister comes back and.
Ricky, would you count a new POV being Ghost? If we're in Ghost through Jon, would you count that as a new POV?
No, but it would make for an amazing chapter.
It
would.
And then if it continues and Jon actually loses his POV, that would be even more.
Dig. Ow!
No, but imagine reading it through Jon's trapped mind and how confusing and how scary that is. and then him coming back, and you don't get the perspective of him coming back. The last thing you read through John's mind is him being trapped in the body of his direwolf. That will be cinema in my book.
Yep.
I think just like maybe a little criticism of the way that the show finished, or at least like I don't know, like I sometimes wonder if season 8, like what happened was so hard to swallow because season 6 and 7 tonally felt like a bit of a change. Season 5 is really, really punishing. I think that a lot of very horrible and bleak stuff happens in season 5, and you reach the end of that season with like your gorgeous heartthrob dead in the snow, and you're like, fuck. Like, Jesus, this is going to be like, what is season 6 going to bring? And then season 6 is like, in the first episode, it's like, what if Brienne killed Ramsay's guards and saved Sansa? What if Jon came back to life? What if Daenerys got away from the Dothraki? What if, Jaime got to ride on a big white horse? What if the Starks got Winterfell back? What if Cersei killed all the High Sparrow lot and, all that stuff? And like Joanna Robinson at the time said, like, Game of Thrones seasons 1 to 5 is like, it's tough when your heroes lose. And then season 6 is like, but what if they won? Wouldn't that be great? And then season 7 delivers on all these like fan fiction-y things that people wanted, like Jorah being cured of his grayscale and Daenerys coming to Westeros and Jon riding he doesn't ride a dragon until season 8. But like, they deliver on all these things. And then season 8, it smacks you really hard with like the tone of season 5 again, where it's like, everybody loses, nobody wins. The throne is a poison apple. Don't go near it. Like, I wonder if that made it that little bit harder, where they teased the fact that it could be a broad kind of epic fantasy, and then with the very, very last 3 episodes, it kind of just burned itself down, which I love. That's why I think it's really bold and brave. But that's why I also understand why people would watch it and go, "What? Like, is it still the same show?"
I'd argue against that, though.
Yeah, I'd actually argue against it as well.
My problem is that it felt very tropey. It felt more like stuff we've seen in big production films and stuff before, and that's the thing that they've abandoned. Because if you take, for example, Jorah being cured of grayscale, yeah, we had theories on how that might work, or how that might even be reactivated, and people have theories on Shireen and stuff. But the way in which they've cured it was just, you just cut it off and then you pull some stuff on it, and it's healed.
Sorry,
You're
no,
good to
I
go,
guess
buddy.
that's what I mean, where like season 6 and 7 are kind of littered with these, like, I mean, I like them, but like season 7 is my least favorite season of Game of Thrones by quite a distance for various reasons. But like, it does have those things where it's like, it gives you the simple answer quite a lot. And then I think with the very last 3 episodes, the answers are not simple. Whether you feel good or bad about them, they're not like, I don't think they're simple, easily digestible answers that give you what you want. Whereas like season 6 and 7 do have things like that in them, which sets expectations, which I'm not going to say subverted. I'm not going to say it, but you know what I mean?
Subverted expectations, huh?
I definitely get where you're
The death
coming
phrase.
from, but like, in terms of, think about where the actual show ends. Like, Sansa becomes Queen of the North. It's kind of what most people wanted. Now, people did not want Bran to become king, but it's a happy ending for Bran, I guess. Bran becomes king.
Yeah.
Jon gets to live out, exile and all of that, which is good for him. That's what he wanted, more or less. I know people wanted him to become king, but come on. That's never what Jon wanted. And that's not, in my opinion, that's not his trajectory. That was never what the character was really building to. Arya gets to go west of Westeros, however that goes.
Yeah, I'll put a pin in that, but I do have a thing about Arya's ending. But yeah, I think Arya's ending is really dark, but like, I agree with your broad point though. So carry on. Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a good point to transition to, because I wonder. I think one of the main Daenerys was at the time was probably maybe the most loved character of anything at that time period. I mean, people were naming dogs after her, they were naming their kids after her, like. So, Rob, I'm interested to hear, like, what are your thoughts on the way that Daenerys' character went by the end of the show?
Well, I find that it's probably the bravest and the boldest and the toughest, and like I think it's like, I mean, the comments are gonna go crazy, but like I think this is like Daenerys is the way Daenerys goes, I feel like is the answer to everything. And it feels like all the conclusions that I came to about the show are all kind of wrapped up and tied up in Daenerys's ending. But I disagree with the notion and the hypothesis that I saw in the aftermath. And on the Wikipedia page for the Bells, it has a whole section about the conclusion of Daenerys's arc and stuff. Because I think, like, and the line is like, people weren't happy with Daenerys's turn from hero to villain. And I loved Daenerys so much, but I never saw her as a hero. I always saw her as she was way more complicated than that. I think an issue that I have with a lot of the criticism, or at least the angry criticism of the end, is that people seem to think that like the Game of Thrones characters are on these arcs that kind of went from one place to another. And what I always kind of found more interesting about Game of Thrones is that the characters were always kind of caught between two opposing forces. And it was about which one of them they would choose. Like the end of Game of Thrones really, really reminds me of the end of The Sopranos broadly, because the first bit of the last season of The Sopranos gives every single character.
Don't spoil it. I'm in the middle of watching.
No. I'm not like
good,
won't do it.
that's all
No,
I'll say.
nothing specific. Nothing specific
Alright.
at all. But like, it's kind of like it shows them a life that they could have. It shows them like a good path, if you will. And then, so that's one way they could go. And then the latter half of the season shows the darker path that they could go down. And it's about which character chooses the good or the bad path. And I think that they lifted that literally, basically verbatim out of The Sopranos and plonked it into Game of Thrones, where it was like each of the characters has like two paths that they could go down by the end of the show, both equally possible. And Daenerys, I don't really see her as a villain either when she does what she does. I think that she has agency, but I think that, Daenerys is only on her own on the walls of King's Landing, completely isolated, because literally everybody else put her there. I don't think she's entirely blameless, but I think that so many things have happened and so many people have turned on her. She has lost so much because she's come to Westeros. Just because, the closer she got to her dream, the further away it got. And just when she thinks she's right there, three of her advisors turn on her. The guy that she loves turns out to be a rival to the throne and also isn't comfortable with the fact that they're family. She loses one and two of her children in really quick succession. She loses friends. She loses the love of the people. And then I think when she's there on the walls of King's Landing, the game has beaten everybody. The game has pushed everybody, has pushed her to that point. Tyrion, Jon, and Varys give her nothing but mixed signals throughout the whole final season. They're like, "Oh yeah, we love you," but then also we're going to kind of scheme behind your back. And what happens in the Bells is everybody's fault. Absolutely everybody's fault. Like, again, right at the start of season 8, Sam sets it all in motion by sort of saying, "Look, she shouldn't be queen; it should be Jon." And yes, I know that's a repercussion of, the prisoner of war thing with the Tarleys, but still, Sam makes a conscious decision there, and it sets the chain of events. And so Daenerys is there. Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing. And you were saying about Emilia Clarke's performance in season 8. I think that 30 seconds that she gets with no words, she just has to do it all through expression to try and communicate the 8 years and 8 seasons of history that just kind of collapse on her in that moment. And there's a line earlier in the episode where she mentions that, like, when she took over Astapor and Yunkai and all that, she said the people, they came forward and they accepted me as their queen. But when she's up on the walls of King's Landing, all she's hearing is people screaming for help. And I think she remembers in that moment that the people who tried to kill her as a baby are still the same people in that city, and they're still the same people that will try and kill her again once they find out that Jon should be king. Once they believe that. And so she goes, right, I have a decision to make here. I am all on my own. The people hate me. Everyone hates me. I only have faith in myself. she's in a very, very bad way, and I think that's the reaction to it. I find her more tragic rather than villainous, which is why I don't really like in the final episode the shot, the gothic queen, like with the wings, because that I know that's from Arya's perspective and John's perspective, but it does reframe her a little too much as like
And yes,
blonde Hitler, which I've never really been totally comfortable with. I find that they followed the rule of cool a bit too much on that shot because it looks amazing, beautiful composition, but it does make Daenerys into like I am, leather bound queen. I'm gonna go and kill
the thing
everybody,
is,
sort
the
of
thing
thing.
is, you're making a very nuanced almost apology. You're almost apologizing something that I think was not there, because in order to nuke a city with 500,000 inhabitants, you have to be bonkers. And
I'm not going to say she was totally sane in that moment. I think there's a
mm,
screw loose, but I think the screw has been loosened by a million external forces, if you know what I
mm,
mean, to the point where she thinks
that's
this is the right thing to do.
here's how I think. Here's how I think that it might have been better if you would want to go that route of her burning down King's Landing. It should have been um, something like her against young Griff. Young Griff took the city, and she's
Yeah.
attacking the city, and one of the dragons gets loose, ignites the wildfire beneath the city, and her being responsible without really being responsible of the murder of those inhabitants is what makes her not go mad. I don't think she'll go mad in the books, but
Mm.
what creates this sort of um sort of a not psychotic. I don't find the right word, but I'm not finding the right word. But what makes her
Yeah.
more nuanced in that direction? I don't think it's as easy as, well, I'm on this thing, and everything that happened to me was bad, and now I'm gonna make a whole city pay for that, because she is at the very at the very core of her character. She's a good heart, a good spirited um,
Hmm.
mind, and that frees people. And I see no, I just see no version where she is making that conscious decision, regardless of her advisors or
Hmm.
people around her in general, spying or making plans about killing her or whatever. I don't see a world where Daenerys is doing that on purpose, or chooses to go that route.
Hmm. Yeah. I think like the kind of I know the main kind of challenge to what I've said is that Daenerys would never do that to innocent people. And
Mm,
I agree. I don't think she would ever do that to people that she believes is innocent. I think the issue is that kind of what I said before is that I don't think she sees those people as innocent anymore. I think she sees them as just people who will just kill her and throw her in the sea as soon as she sits on the throne. I think she just all whether she's right or wrong, I think she
mm,
just sees them as like another army that she has to beat because as soon as she sits on that throne, they will just cut a throat and like that's it. We're not having a Targaryen on these lands. Get out. And I think she remembers in that moment, like again, Benioff and Weiss in those. One thing I will say is that those inside the episode things
Yes,
that they did.
things that are very heavily
God, they are the
criticized.
stupidest. They are the stupidest things.
Daenerys
I
just
hate
forgot
them
about
for
you're on
like House
fleek.
of the Dragon as well because like they're clearly all recorded in bulk because they always wear the same clothes.
Yeah.
And like you're asking them to remember something that they worked on 2 years ago in a quickly digestible format, which is why you end up with them saying things like, "Oh yeah, Daenerys, I guess she kind of forgot about the fleet,
Yeah.
and when she gets to
mm,
King's Landing, she's like, I'm here for revenge." Ugh. And I think they just like that's not what they thought when they wrote it down. That's just it takes more time than that. TV shows just
mm.
don't poof into existence. Like, you know, they will have spent a lot of time on this. Like, I just, oh god, those inside the episode things are so, they're just open goals. They are open goals for people to just like attack. And oh yeah, I wish they'd chosen their words more carefully.
I just want to come at it from a different perspective. So I was one of those people that was like, I was all for Mad Queen Daenerys, like her falling off the deep end. And I was not a fan. But I think in retrospect, the way I would have done it differently, that I think more people would have digested it a bit better, myself included, is either one, give a little bit more build up to it, you know, in terms of like her actually maybe discussing some of the concepts you're talking about, specifically Rob, or because for the most part we see Missandei's death. We see definitely like she's depressed over this. Of course, she just lost her best friend, you know, someone she considered like her sister. We see her grieving over that. There's just not a lot there from like that point until we get to the point where she's like, okay, I'm gonna nuke the whole city. Now, what I think could have worked better is if that redirected anger, that redirected pain goes towards the person that actively hurt her in Cersei, the person that actively took a loved one away. And in the process of doing that, saying she's going for the Red Keep, you know, she's going for Maegor's Holdfast, whatever. In that process, that leads her, because of her anger, because of the things she's going through, that then leads her to killing innocent people along the way. Whether
change
that's because
the order slightly.
Yeah, just change it slightly to where you still have the effect of Daenerys has kind of gone off the deep end. She's killing innocent people to get revenge, things that, you know, very much are present in Arya and the Hound's arcs, and tied that in better. Outside of just like the way the show or that episode is shot, it's literally just like we're seeing Daenerys just strafe run up our streets just over and over and over again. And I think for me, even personally, like we just didn't need it as much. I felt like after a while, it just got to the point where it's like, okay, I get the idea. Daenerys is burning down like every single person, and I get the point of like, you know, the innocents are being affected by this. This has always been a common thing that's been done throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. Game of Thrones has been back and forth on that, but I don't know. It just left me with a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm somebody that wanted it. I just didn't love the execution of it personally.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I spoke to Miltos Yarolemu a few years ago for the show, his way of doing it was that, like, I mean, I didn't feel this way, but I saw where he was coming from. He sort of said, like, you know, when Daenerys was doing that, he said, I didn't really, he said, if anything, I was distracted by the fact that I was constantly asking myself, like, why is she doing this? Like, what's the why? Like, what are her intentions in that moment? And I think, like, again, I will have to say that, like, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I'm not the average person when it comes to Game of Thrones. Like, I have like suspicions that I'm on the spectrum, but like, you know, I think I spent a lot of time in 2019 and 2020. I was not well during the sort of like the run up and then including the pandemic, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I rewatched the episode like 5 times, mostly expecting the criticisms to like, oh yes, I see now, I get it, but like it just kind of never happened. But I appreciate though that I dedicate more time than the average person to Game of Thrones. Like I mean, I think it's because it came to me at such a kind of vulnerable point in my life, and then it kind of lifted me out of that, or it was part of the process. And so, like, you know, like there are bands you really love unconditionally,
Yes,
regardless of like how low things might go. Like, I don't think that's, for me, that's more season 7 with Game of Thrones. I appreciate season 8 a lot more because I think season 8 yanks the show back on message after season 7, which is bumpy. Season 7 is bumpy. It is a bumpy season of television. I will say that much, but yeah.
I think season 7 is on par, if not worse, than season 8. And I think both seasons suck. I think whoever came up with this whole plan regarding stealing a white and
the
bringing
boys
it
trip.
to Cersei's.
Hell yeah, the boys trip. We're getting the boys together, baby.
That is an episode of television of all time. And then also, I hate everything about Darth Maul sitting on an ice dragon with blue eyes and melting the wall. I think that's also just incredibly goofy.
Yeah, that's
the
the
whole
kind of
image where he
broad
was
fantasy
flying and it was
thing.
like,
Yeah.
oh, he's, like, fuck off.
Well, the whole point of season 7 is how do we get the White Walkers south of the wall? And when you don't have the Horn of Winter, you don't have some of the other explanations possibly in the books. It's like you got to figure something out. Like how is this going to happen? And I think they've really
they wrote
struggled with that in
backwards,
season
didn't
7.
they?
Yeah.
They wrote backwards. Yeah, they thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the Night King had a dragon? How do we make that happen?
Yeah,
Like,
The White Walker
yeah,
spawn chains.
which okay, fine. You have to level the playing field.
Yep.
Fine, like it's whatever. But yeah, the second half of season 7 is a bit. It's a bit. That's something I think that needs more time because I think there's lots of justifications for going beyond the wall. They just never use any of them.
Yeah.
We've seen characters go beyond the wall before for sketchy means, like, taking the whole Night's Watch out into winter to investigate a potential White Walker problem.
One of
Maybe
the
not
worst
the
decisions
safest
ever
thing to do.
in both the book and the show.
Oh yeah.
What? Sorry?
So, what you were just like hinting at, the whole Gior Mormont's little expedition.
The Great Ranging.
Terrible decision. Terrible.
Yeah. But it's in the show, but in the show, I think in season 2, they do enough groundwork to sort of be like, right, there's a problem. Let's go and look, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I do think, if I'm being really forgiving, which I rarely am about the White plot, season 7, episode 5 and 6 are two of my least. They're at the very, very, very bottom of my pile for Game of Thrones. I think they're the two weakest episodes by a fair distance, mainly because it centers around something that I'm like, what? But if I'm being really, really forgiving, I would say that Tyrion in that moment is absolutely, Jorah and Tyrion are absolutely desperate in that moment to just come up with something that proves themselves to Daenerys. But that's on a very, very forgiving day for me. Mostly it's because, they wrote backwards. They needed something to like do to get the dragons and the White Walkers fighting, and maybe in a different version of the show, they deal with the White Walker problem in the season. They deal with the White Walker problem that way. Like, they finish the penultimate season with that conflict, but then I think they worry about losing viewers for the final season if the White Walkers are gone. And so I understand, why they do the way they do it, but a full season dedicated to like solving the White Walker problem so that the final season can be solving the Iron Throne problem, which is kind of how the last season goes anyway, just in less time.
Yeah.
Like, maybe have the fight beyond the wall or at the wall or something, like, because then you can kind of do all that and deal with it at the same time. But, I'm not a TV writer. I can only take a red pen to things that already exist rather than coming up with ideas of my own.
That is one thing. I do think if season 8 had been given more time, like in terms of either a bigger season or maybe just 2 smaller seasons, however they wanted to do it, I think it would have helped with a lot of their ideas. Like some of the things they wanted to do. Like the Daenerys thing, of course, if we had like another episode or 2, there could have been a lot more that they could have built into by the time we get to the point where she has her flip. So I think that's a good point. I think having more time with the show, the episodes would have really helped.
I would have really appreciated more time with long-awaited Long Night. I always thought of it as a continental conflict. I never saw like one big battle because, by that logic, you could have just chilled in the Riverlands and never gotten wind of any of it. And I think it's very important that magic, like this big magical conflict that then possibly takes magic away again, which I've always thought of it as like the return of magic in A Song of Ice and Fire, and then if it ends with possibly all the dragons dying and everything that has to do with magic sleeping again. But then again, I'm talking about the books, and this is something that I wanted to happen, not something that they've teased. Like, why would otherwise there's no reason for them to include Cersei, because Cersei would have been included if it were meant to be a continental conflict. I always thought the idea of them constantly getting pushed south until until something somewhere else happens that has to do with Green Scene. But that's not something that was in store anyway.
Yeah, I think like with the problems obviously that George R. R. Martin is having with regards to like getting to the last leg of the story and the problems that a lot of people, believe that the show had with regards to like landing and sticking that landing. I think a lot of it does come down to like the very nature of the story itself, because obviously a lot of people are going to compare it to like TV show endings that like, they love and they think, well, this sucks in comparison to that. But I sort of think about, Breaking Bad. Like, I like the end of Breaking Bad. I don't think it's my favorite final episode of anything. Fantastic TV show, one of my favorite series of all time. But like, a lot of people love the Breaking Bad ending. But like, with Breaking Bad, you have to care about the fortunes of Walter White, Jesse Pinkman, maybe like Skyler, Walter Jr., Marie. Like, I'm kind of running a bit thin on the ground here about, characters who were like really, really invested.
The evil
And then
group
like
against all shots.
and then with like and then with like The Sopranos, like you care about a smallish group of people. I literally last night finished Better Call Saul for the second time, and again you
Better
care
Call
about
Saul is the best television
so
show
good.
of all
Jim.
time.
I love it. I think it's great, but like the ending, like you care about Jimmy and you care about Kim, and okay. With Game of Thrones, you care about Jon, Tyrion, Daenerys, Sam, Brienne, Jaime, Cersei. Like I think
The Dornish Prince.
Yes, that nameless Dornish prince. We all love that guy. Like, I think because everybody had their favorite, which means that somebody kind of had to lose, and that's not like Nikolai Coster-Waldau in the press sometimes is like, oh, people are only angry about the end of the show because they don't know what they want, and it's like, no, I think fans do know what they want. It's just that lots of people wanted very different things just as much.
Yep.
And that's tough. And maybe that's a criticism of the writing process, or maybe it's not a criticism at all of either any side of this. I think it's just like, I'm not going to say like, oh, it was never going to be received well, because there are ways that it could have been received well.
Yes.
But I do think that is an argument at least worth entertaining, which is that there are so many moving parts in the final bit of Game of Thrones that like, if you make sure that some of those moving parts win, then some of them have got to lose. And that's always going to be tough for people to take. And I think like it must have been in that writing room. They must have gone over several permutations of this. Like, I mean, I've recently heard that like they had Brienne or the Hound down to kill the Night King initially. Brienne was going to go beyond the wall with them lot on that Seven Samurai thing. Magnificent Seven, the Dirty Half Dozen and One, whatever you want to call it. Like, so they clearly do go over these things a million times. I think my point is that like I don't think they did the ending to upset anybody. I really, really don't. I think that's something that I find it tough to get past in a lot of online discussions where a lot of people seem to believe that they made that ending to piss people off.
No,
and to upset people.
I think they were very confident in their ending. They talked about it. They compared it to, is it an A or an A plus like Breaking Bad? I think that's something that they've said in an interview. And I think everyone has their own opinion. Like even with Greece, Eric doesn't like the ending, but he doesn't like the ending for different reasons than I do. Because to me, Danny going mad in the way she did is a big part of why I didn't like it. For him, if there were two more episodes and they would have done the groundwork, then they could have worked better for him. It never would for me. Danny going mad like that, you couldn't explain that unless you go for something that is very nuanced and in turn fucks up her mind. If something like her accidentally lighting it up on fire fucks up her mind, who would be sane after that? Stuff like that. But the conscious decision to burn a whole city to the ground, I never and would never buy that. But that is the way that they've gone about it, and then again, it's
Ricky,
totally fine.
It's just Targaryen things. Didn't you watch House of the Dragon season 2? Aemon does the same thing. Okay, just
but comparing Aemon and comparing aim and
We have the power. We
and-
will use it. Yeah. I think, like, I don't know, like with Jon and Daenerys' whole thing, I think it kind of comes back. It's always in my head, kind of come back to an exchange they have in like their first meeting, or it's like their second scene together, where Daenerys says, you know, we all enjoy what we're good at, and Jon just goes, I don't. And I think that there was why they were never going to work, and maybe why, again, like their relationship fell apart in such an ideologically destructive way for both of them, because they're both broken people by the end of it. Like at that point where Jon's like, I'm not. I don't know how I feel about the scene itself where Jon kills Daenerys. Like, it's very pulled a fast one on you there, guys. You didn't see that coming, sort of thing. But I think like them being in that situation and Daenerys being in a position where she's forced to just rely on her survival instincts in that moment, and Jon being forced to rely on his. I think that in itself made sense. I don't like the monologue about I was a little girl who couldn't count to 20, and I think they could
that
have.
is one of the dialogues of all time. It's just
Yeah,
just
they
as
could have
much as the
communicated the same
conversation
feeling but
between
differently.
just as much as the conversation between Tyrion and Jon. She killed the masters of Yunkai and whatever it was. And when
Yeah.
she was at Esteporn, everywhere she goes, bad people die, and we cheer her for it. It's just such
The
a
problem is
lazy
the
way
show
of
made them
reframing
to
what
be
we've
bad
watched.
guys.
It's
Yeah,
just
I have a
like
slightly different interpretation of that than most people. I don't know if we're meant to take that as like this is the reason why it has happened. I always kind of read it as like this is why Tyrion thinks it's happened. As I don't know if we're necessarily
It would
supposed
add
to
up.
agree with him,
Tyrion's
because
kind of a
Jon
dummy.
spends a lot of that scene arguing with him. Jon just spend a lot of that season kind of fighting back against like, no, that's not what it is. That's not the reason. We don't
it's
just have our house words painted on our hearts and that sort of whatever
true,
he says.
but it's in a
But
scene where you know Jon is meant to come to the conclusion that yes, Tyrion is right, which is why I think that is their excuse for what they've done, because they must have anticipated somewhat of an outrage, because you know Dany was and is an icon, so that was their way of you know, this is why, and you either like it or you don't, which is how I took it, at least.
yeah, I mean, but like, I think it could be, yeah. Like I say, I totally understand why people would take it that way. Like, you know, I'm not sitting here like there are a lot of people out there who insist that like the final season is a masterpiece, and that like anyone who criticizes it clearly just doesn't understand it. Like, we're all intelligent. I think the only thing
Yeah.
I could maybe accuse us all of is maybe we were sitting too close. We maybe felt it a bit too much. We maybe forgot that it was just a TV show for like a little bit, like, because we all cared a lot. Like, we all cared so much. I care far too much about it. If I didn't like the ending, I would probably care just as much, but negatively, and that doesn't really reflect well on me. I think maybe we all got a bit too involved and a bit too invested, but like, if they were making the show, like the people who make say, "Oh, that's just a sign of how good it is and like how great we were at our jobs," and like, yeah, okay, I get that to a degree. I find it kind of funny when people accuse Benioff and Weiss of like assassinating Daenerys' character when like they made the version of Daenerys that everybody fell in love with in the first place. So like, you know, you kind of have to credit them for both things there. Like Daenerys didn't just, but like you can
Yeah.
disagree with their decisions. I think it's just
Yeah.
when it becomes a bit like, I think my issue has never ever been. I mean, God, this is going to sound like it's part of the culture wars, but like some of my absolute best friends in the whole wide world, like, do not like the end of Game of Thrones. Like Jay, who I co-host the House of the Dragon episodes with, he's a big book guy. He's more like yourselves. He's like very much wedded to the books and did not get on with Game of Thrones from about season 5 onwards. But like,
That would be me.
That would not
yeah,
be me.
but like we happily discuss the show like all the time. I think like sometimes we've maybe got a little bit lost in everything is a culture war now.
Yeah.
Everything is an argument about somebody's character, because I get the feeling that like if I was to explain my point of view, online, somebody would come back and say, "Oh, so you fell for the misogynist propaganda at the end of Game of
Mm.
Thrones," and I'd be like, "Oh, okay." But then if that person put their argument forward, I would then say, like, I could then say, "Oh, so you believe in like political hierarchies? Then do you? You believe that monarchy is fine?" And I don't necessarily. I think that is where it's gone.
Oh yeah,
Unfortunately, that is where it's gone. I think we've forgotten that we're just discussing fictional people on a TV show that don't exist.
House of the Dragon
That
And
has
is true.
definitely got there for me.
yeah,
I feel like I can't talk about House of the Dragon on social media, or it's just going to be people yelling at each
Mhm.
other.
No.
yeah. Which again, with House of the Dragon, like I'm much cooler with House of the Dragon. I enjoy it. I like it a lot, but I'm much more relaxed about it. I'm happy to
Mm.
just. It is what it is. I've read Fire and Blood, so like I actually have an opinion on the changes that they're making for once. I didn't really with
Mm.
Game of Thrones, but like I think sometimes when I come away from an episode and I see a lot of people getting very angry about it, like I just kind of think to myself, like, is it not just a good kind of B plus fantasy show with like really outstanding production values and some good performances and a nice theme kind of running through the middle? I wasn't massive on season 2. It's my least favorite season of anything in the whole Song of Ice and Fire universe. But sometimes I just kind of think like, yeah, creative people, they get things wrong sometimes, but like they don't do it to make enemies of people. They just think that they're doing the right thing. They
My
might
gripe
not be
with
doing the
House of
right
the
thing, but
Dragon, and I don't want to go too much into it because this is going to take very long.
We could have a whole another hour and a
Is
half of House of
my
the Dragon.
yeah, yeah.
oh yeah, but we've done that in the past
Yeah.
numerous of times. But my gripe with House of the Dragon is once again because I feel like I've been teased something in the first season and
Mhm.
even in parts of season 2 that didn't come to fruition, and now I'm right where at the point where like you just said, it's just a television show with extraordinary production, great acting, amazing music, and the things that I thought might come are so obviously not going to go down, and now it's like, okay, but this is what I thought we were gonna do now. But so it's always personal, I think, and that's why I'm not going forward. And I don't plan on making bad faith videos on my very personal opinion on something and
Mhm.
spread it out there and tell everybody how much I think it sucks, because I don't take myself that seriously, and I think they shouldn't either.
But boy, oh boy, if a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is disappointing to Ricky, he's gonna have an explosion on stream. He's gonna have a mental
That is
breakdown.
something that is something that I'm once again very, very that's very near and dear to me. The way in which you talk about how Game of Thrones helped you
Yeah.
during your darker days, that's Duncan Egg for me. Those are the tales of Duncan Egg, and yeah, it's always personal, is what I'm trying to say and stumbling through here. It's always personal, and as we've just proved, you can hold a 1
Just be
hour and
respectful
23
about it. Or
minute long
respectful about it.
conversation with
Yeah.
completely different views on something.
Mm.
7 to 8 years later, how many years has it been? 7
Yeah,
years, right?
2019, so it'd be 7 years in May.
Yeah,
Wow. God, that's nearly as long as
crazy.
it was on for.
That's sad to think about. My channel didn't exist
G-
in 2019. Didn't it?
Jesus
It's
V had
crazy.
a question that I think would be perfect
Oh, I saw this question. I was gonna
to
bring it up, but
to end this.
yep.
And I would want Rob to go first with it. What do you think would have been the ideal ending for Jon in Game of Thrones?
I really like his ending anyway. I think
Hmm.
that like him, a broken man, being banished, whether by choice or whether he wants it or not, being banished, leaving his life and all of his trauma and literal death behind, trying to piece himself together, but an exiled secret king who never got to claim his throne and save the world, but at what cost? And there's that little baby bit of grass kind of growing through there. Maybe, maybe one day he might be okay. He might heal, whether it's physically, whether it's mentally. Just kind of to go back to before as well, just dropping about Arya. I found Arya's ending much darker because Arya doesn't know if she's sailing to new lands or if she's going to just sail off the end of the map and just go boop and die. Like, she doesn't know whether she's sailing into a future or oblivion. Whereas I think with Jon, his ending is dismal, but there's a little bit of hope there. And you always have to leave somebody with a little bit of hope. Just that's a little bit. I think they leave us with a bit too much hope in King's Landing. I think they realize the implications of having a surveillance system be king, and then they go, oh shit, that's a Pandora's box that we don't have time for, and then they just kind of close it, and everything's fine. Nothing will be bad ever again. The wheel may turn, but just more politely. But I like Jon's ending. But what about you guys?
What about you, Eric?
Well, I mean, we're all talking about Jon, but I think the guy we really should be talking about is Bronn, because the absolute Chad becomes the Lord of Highgarden. Yeah, but in terms of Jon's ending, I don't have much to say about Jon's ending. I mean, I think it was the natural point of where his character was going. It's that, in my opinion, it's like the ideal version of where we go with the character. The whole time we've been with the character, he is not wanting to be king. He's not wanting to be involved in all this other stuff. He hasn't wanted to be, he has wanted to be at times, at least in the books, Lord of Winterfell. He's had been tempted by that. But, his relationship with Ygritte, the trauma he's gone through. He's literally gone to the idea that there is no afterlife. There is nothing there. It is just black, more or less. And him going into, north of the wall, I don't really have a problem with that. I think that made sense. It's more like, I think my issues with Jon are more throughout the season, not his exact ending.
And that would be the same for me too. I think it's a very fitting ending that just wasn't earned. I don't think Jon had the time to really reflect on some of the things that have happened to him for me to be able to really relate to his struggle. Because I'm big on scenes that where we really explore his thoughts on what has happened, and I think we didn't really get much of that after his death.
Yeah.
So for him to be to sail off north and being there, that's the perfect ending for him. I think it is supposed to be bittersweet because we should want him to be free, and I guess he's kind of free. What I always interpreted was that him looking back at the wall, and he's he's wearing the Night's Watch gowns. Is he, deserting the Night's Watch at the end? What is he doing? Because he's reflecting on something, and I think that was quite fitting. So I liked Jon's ending without the journey that took him there.
The real question is, why is there a Night's Watch? There's a giant hole in the wall, and the White Walkers, from what we know, are gone. But
well, I guess, I always kind of say that, like, at the start of the show, they don't know White Walkers exist, but the Night's Watch is there. So, it's still there. Like, well, I think it's kind of acknowledged, isn't it? Like, it only exists because there are criminals and they need somewhere to go.
That's fair. I was going to point that, like, it's also for the wildlings, but in the show, there's not, like, the wildlings are, I don't know. Yeah, like, is there a population of the wildlings still alive? I don't really.
Plus,
I know
there is some.
So yeah, I don't know. It's a little confusing.
Some guys up in Fen who have missed the events of the entire series and are like, oh, let's go and cause some trouble.
The Skagosi, they're just kind of like chilling around. Nobody's bothered them with their unicorns or anything. They're just chilling.
Alrighty. Like, hey.
Go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Let's. I think we should wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. This was a great discussion, and I think it just goes to show that even years later, you can have a civil fucking discussion about this show, even though the general consensus is that you should burn it to the ground and whatever. And yeah, once again, thank you for joining me, and all the best.
Thank you. This has been. I'm very, very excited about this. This was good. This was good. I hope. Oh, I hope there aren't more people in the world that hate me than did about 2 hours ago. But
I'll also
the
point
risk
this
you
out.
take.
We went so guys, we talked about this for an hour and a half. We didn't even touch like every aspect of the show that you could talk about. Like so many people have problems with the Jamie and Cersei's end. We didn't have time for it. There's just so much you can talk about. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching the stream.